My name is Margie Kay, and I'm an investigator of UFOs and paranormal and anything that goes along with that, like Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And I'm also an experiencer of paranormal and UFOs. I got started doing investigations after I had my own experiences. And the paranormal started at an early age. I was actually seeing and communicating with ghosts by the age 11. And I had my first UFO sighting at around age 15. So I was curious about that, and I wanted to know more, and just wanted to get more answers. I started getting magazines on the subject and reading books, every book imaginable that I could get from the library. And of course, at that time we didn't have internet, so we were limited as to, the amount of research we could do. There was still quite a bit. I would, go to the library once a month and get 10 or 15 books and just pour through them. And so I started doing investigations myself at about age 16, interviewing other people and finding out that they were having some of the same experiences I was. And I thought the best way to find answers is to talk to as many people as possible that had had similar experiences. So that's the way it is today. I got involved with a major UFO investigation group, and I started my own investigation group to study the UFO phenomena as well as paranormal, and found out that those two things can't really be separated. You've got to be open-minded to all things. To date, I've probably seen over 600 people who have had similar experiences. And so there's no question to me now whether the UFO phenomena is real, whether there are interdimensional beings, whether there are ghosts. There just are. They're there, and now our job as investigators is to try to find out what, where they're coming from. How are they getting here? Why are they here? Are they interdimensional? Are they interplanetary? Are they people that have been here all along? Are they, different beings that have been here and they're sharing the planet with us? All of these things could be possible. Out of all the investigations I've done, I have only found 2 hoaxes that I know to be hoaxes. There were a few, let's just separate the UFO, because in the UFO field we have many misidentified objects. So about 40% of those are identified. About 60% are unidentified, as far as my experience goes. And there are a few in there that could be a gray area where I'm just not sure which way to go on it. But I was surprised to see how many UFO investigations or UFO sightings were really something unexplained. Because what I had been told before I got really heavily involved in this 4 years ago was that there were only 5% or maybe 10% that remained unexplained. But if you talk to any serious investigator, they're going to tell you that that number is much higher. Well, we have what's called flaps. There will be a surge of UFO sightings, like the flap in Kansas City from 2011 to 2012. There was a huge number of UFO sightings. In October of 2011, we had the most sightings in that area of anywhere in the world. So there were about 93 reports in the state of Missouri. 87 of those were in Kansas City alone. And remember that most people don't report UFO sightings. In one case, there was a possible UFO over the Chiefs Stadium, and hundreds of cars were stopped on the highway watching this because they didn't know what it was. Well, it turned out it was a flying team that flew their planes very, very close together, and they had giant strobe lights on them, and it's at night, And so this is something that's extremely unusual. Most people haven't seen. But out of all of those hundreds of people, only one person called the report in. So, you know, like I said, most people don't report. So you can imagine how many sightings are really going on. I think it's only a matter of time until more sightings are reported that are close encounters. There are one-on-one encounter with ET. And whether that's an extraterrestrial or an ultra-terrestrial or some type of a being that's been here all along on the earth, maybe millions of years before us. Human beings may not be the only beings on this planet, even though many others look the same as us. I've personally encountered 2 beings that were not human. And I've heard stories from other people as well. The 2 that I encountered did not have an aura around them. I see the energy field around living things. And there was absolutely no energy field. It's just one in particular I'm thinking of. And that's what made me notice him. And he was also very tall. He was about 7 feet tall. He looked like a human being, except for the height, which is a little bit out of the norm, and there was no energy field. Well, there was a telepathic communication going on there. He picked up that I saw that, and I knew that he wasn't a human being. And shortly thereafter, he left the UFO conference we were at and was never to be seen again, and he's never been there again. I've gone every year and haven't seen him. Well, being a UFO investigator, you get in this investigative mode and doing paranormal investigations. My first animal mutilation case came up in Kansas City 3 years ago. And I saw it on TV. It was reported on television, and the rancher was visibly upset. And I immediately called the TV station to get in contact with that rancher and get out on the site. Because many times I had heard at that time that UFOs could be involved with cow mutilations. And being so close to home and never have heard, I had not heard of any cow mutilations in Kansas City before. And now I know there were a lot, but at that time I didn't. So I went on my first case, and I realized this was really, really very strange. There was no blood on the ground, and the cow had been moved by the farmer, so we saw the area where it had been lying, and saw that there was this 2-inch indentation in this very, very hard, dry earth where the cow was. You could see the complete outline of the cow. The only logical explanation that we could come up with is that it was dropped from above, and this heavy animal had to have been dropped from above. Well, what could do that overnight and there's no blood on the ground? The animal was obviously taken somewhere else, drained of all the blood, and then taken back. So the first thing you think of is, what has that technology? Well, ET probably has that technology. And perhaps our own military has that technology. We don't know because they don't admit it and they don't discuss it. The most recent files, FBI files that were just released, are talking about cases that happened in the 1970s. And there's nothing recent. So whatever our government knows about it, they're not telling. So that makes me even more interested. And the cow mutilations, I find out doing research that there have been a lot of cow mutilations across the nation, specifically in the state of Missouri where I am. I've been mostly focusing on that area. And now, to date, I have 32 cow mutilations from the 1970s until today that are reported. And I started a new website. It's called inv.blogspot.com. And that site is for researchers and the public to file reports and to use as a reference to see all these different commonalities. One of the common things is strange lights that people can't explain, and UFO sightings over the same area. So, all of this stuff is interconnected in some manner, and just like other investigators, I want to know why. I've talked to several people about animal mutilations, witnesses, farmers, ranchers who've had the experience. And when I ask them what they think the reason is, the first thing they usually say is that extraterrestrials are using some parts of the animals, because it's generally the same parts that are taken, that they have some reason to want to have those parts. Maybe they eat them. Maybe they use them for something. Or maybe, this is another theory, our military or ET is testing the animals to see what environmental changes have done to them, have affected them, how they've been affected by our air, our water, our land, by the food they're eating. What kind of toxins are in these things that are causing changes in the animals? And if they test the same things repeatedly over and over, are they looking for something there? So I'm open to both of those theories. It could be our military, our government checking, could be ET. I'm leaning more towards ET, and the reason is, usually in these sightings, the witness will have either seen something very odd and unexplained, like weird lights around the area, and then they'll have a mutilation they find. And then, after that, then they'll hear or see helicopters or planes, or they'll have low-flying black helicopters flying over their property. They're obviously our military checking something out. I mean, I was on an investigation recently where we heard planes, but we couldn't see them. And there was a huge view. We were on this huge ranch with many, many acres and a wide open sky. And we heard these very, very low flying planes, but couldn't see them. What is that about, But it's after the fact. It's always after the fact, and it could be going on for several weeks after the mutilation. And, in one case I had a mutilation, looked at that, 9 days later, a mutilation on the same farm in almost the same place. And in both cases, military craft were flying overhead right after. A lot of people think that the ETs and our government are working together, and that they've told the military, we're going to do this, and then you can come by and check it out afterwards. Other people think that our military knows when ET has been there. Maybe there's some type of radar, maybe some sophisticated technology when they know ET is going to be in a certain place, or that they've been there and left. And so they're just following behind to see what they've done. So we have, two theories as far as that goes. I had my first UFO experience when I was 16 months old. I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that this really, really strange thing happened. And I have memories back to 3 months old. What happened was my parents put me to bed, and at some point during the night, I was awakened by a bluish white light coming in the window. And I was afraid of it. I wasn't sure what it was. And I also heard drums in the background. Native American war drums. And how I knew what that was at that age, I have no clue. But I did know what it was. And the next thing I knew, I had felt blood all over me and all over the bed. And I screamed for my parents, and they came in. They found the entire bed soaked with blood and dripping on the floor. I had a terrible nosebleed. And I knew, and I could feel something way, 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 way up in my nose, and I knew it shouldn't be there. And I thought that that's what was causing the nosebleed. Well, they finally got it stopped and cleaned me up, put me back to bed. But that was a traumatic experience, and I remembered that my entire life. Later on in life, I had several UFO sightings, and I'd been talking to other people, and I knew that there was something going on, and I suspected that that might have been when it started. Well, I was regressed by a therapist, and she specializes in cases like this. So she was sure not to have any leading questions, and just to ask questions like, when did this first start? What did you see? Etc. And I was shocked. I was shocked to see what I saw. I was actually an observer in the room, watching myself as a 16-month-old lying in the bed, and I see these three beings that are about 4 foot, 4.5 feet tall, float in through that blue-white light, right through the windows. And for some reason, we had a telepathic communication, and they told me that they can only get through walls and windows by using this blue-white light. And so that solved a lot of questions for me for all the cases I've been working on over the years. A lot of questions about how do they go through walls? Well, they use this light. Now, I don't know what it's made of, or what causes it to change the molecules in such a way that people can go through solid objects. But at least I know they have to have that. So the next thing I see is one is an older gentleman, and he has a few wrinkles on his face. They're obviously not human. They had heads a little bit bigger than ours and a little bit more elongated. They had smaller mouths and smaller nose than we do. They were thin but extremely muscular. I mean, just all muscle. And they were wearing tight-fitting suits. So I remembered, a few details about that. And I see the youngest one pick me up, and I'm in sort of a catatonic state, like almost stiff as a board, with my eyes open, but I couldn't move. So they had actually done something. And then they took me through the wall up into a craft. I could see the craft above us as we went up. And there was like an opening where this light was, and the light beamed up. And then a solid floor appeared underneath where the light was. So they, obviously have high technology. They did a number of physical tests on me that I remember, and then took me back. So this was very traumatic. I knew it was real. I knew I didn't imagine it. And I knew that it had been repressed by my mind, by my conscious mind, and put in my subconscious. And I also knew that this wasn't going to come forward to me until much later in life, when I could actually deal with it. And I'm glad I didn't know everything, every detail, until many years later, until I was in my 40s when I saw that. After that, I knew that I was an experiencer, and that that was an implant that was put in. There was probably more than one. In 1987, I actually had an implant removed from just underneath my navel. And that was, the doctor told me it was a hernia. It wasn't. That's another just wild, crazy story. It involved the doctor telling me I was going to have a little 1/4-inch incision and be done with it, very small hernia. And I woke up the next morning in a hospital, in a room, and there was no roommate. They kept me there for 3 days. It was supposed to be outpatient surgery. And the only people I saw during the whole 3 days was the doctor himself, the surgeon, and the intern who was assisting him. There were no nurses coming in and out. They even brought me my food trays. I knew something was up. I suspected something. and I had a lot of pain. Well, the intern came in after I woke up in the room, and she wanted to check the bandage, so she pulled the bandage back, and this like blood and water mixture was just squirting out all over the bed and all over the floor. So she says, "Oh my gosh, let me go get the doctor." So she ran out of the room, and in walked a tall man, an older gentleman with white hair, and he said he was from Unity Church. And was everything okay? And I said, "Well, actually, no. And I'm not looking forward to having to have this stitched up when they were just supposed to do their job, you know." And he says, "Well, let's say a little prayer." And he held my hand for a minute and said a prayer and left. He wasn't in the room for 2 minutes. The doctor and the intern came running back in the room, pulled this back, and it was healed shut. And the doctor looked at the intern and he says, "What's going on?" Because, I mean, he was obviously a little freaked out. She says, "Look at the floor." And here's blood all over the floor and all over the bed. And he's like, "Oh my gosh." So he had this funny look on his face. And before the surgery, I had a strange request. I said, will you save the hernia for me?" I didn't even know why I asked that question. So I remembered it right then, and I said, "Oh, did you save that hernia for me?" He says, "No, I threw that out." So I knew he was lying. I remote viewed it to see what happened. And what happened was he opened me up, and there was an object in there that was moving around. And he had to open me up a little more. That's why I have a 3-inch incision instead of a 1/4-inch incision. And he finally grabbed it, put it in a cloth, put it in a plastic bag. Then I saw him go outside, have the intern sew me up. That's why I didn't sew up completely. That's why it wasn't done right. He left the room and he made a phone call, and I saw a man in a suit come meet him and take that package. So the doctor knew what he was looking at. He'd already had experience with it. Obviously, I wasn't the first one. And he knew who to call in a case like that and hand it over to them. So I'm not the only one being watched like this. There are a lot of people that have had this same thing happen. What they want, I have no clue. But they're tracking at least some people, maybe everyone for all we know. But they're at least tracking, they meaning probably ETs, a lot of people. Why they're doing it, I still don't have any clue. It could be a faction of the government. I mean, obviously we have the technology now. Did we have it in 1957 or 58? I don't know. We do know that the government withholds technology. We do know that they've taken ET technology and reverse engineered it. Maybe we've been given some technology in trade for something else like abductions. I don't know what they want, but they're definitely tracking us. I've had a number of experiences recently in what I call real time, without having to have any regression to remember it. So you're just remembering events as they happen. One event happened when I was at home alone. My husband was out of town, and I saw the ceiling open up, basically just this black hole open up in the ceiling just to the right of my bed. And this hand reached down, and I calmly took the hand of this being who was obviously an ET, and he took me up into a craft and sat me down at a table and showed me a screen to look, like an LCD screen, computer screen, and showed me a vision of a future event. And at the time, this was 3 years ago, I saw an asteroid coming towards the Earth that was flaming, coming through our atmosphere, and explode in Russia. And then we recently had that asteroid that hit the atmosphere right over Russia, and actually part of it went into a lake there, and it caused a lot of damage. I mean, it was a big explosion. It wasn't as big an explosion as they showed me, because I saw a huge crater and debris going everywhere. And I believe that either technology or thought pushed that asteroid off course enough that it did not make that direct hit like it was going to. And perhaps that these ETs told many people about it, because I actually worked on that to keep that from hitting the Earth. And then I talked to some other people who did the same thing. They knew it was coming ahead of time, and just with telepathy, with our thoughts, which we now know are very important and can change outcomes and can make things happen. I think that that's what happened, that it pushed it away. Either that or we have some technology that took it out. ET can be many different things. And I'm in telepathic communication with 2 extraterrestrials. One is a mantis. And a lot of people think the mantis are bad. This particular one is not. I mean, as far as I know, he's one of the good guys. But there are many, many different races. What I've been told and what other people have been told. There are many races of ETs. Some of them are bad. Some of them are good. Some of them, I've been told, are taking resources from our planet right now. And some of them live in the earth and are taking resources. And they're just here to extract what they need and leave. And they don't really care about the life that's living on the planet now. The good ETs are here to curtail that and try to stop them from doing that. And in fact, one of the fleet commanders that I've been in touch with is Thor, Valiant Thor. I was in touch with him before I even knew who this guy was. He came to me in 1985, I think, while I was living in Seattle. He just appeared on the wall and gave me a new ability. I mean, I get a new ability every year, is how this goes. Well, he appears on the wall after I did a light therapy project and spoke to me, and he says, now you have X-ray vision. Well, I didn't know, I had no clue what that was until later in life. I was doing a reading for somebody, and all of a sudden I could see inside their body. So I can just look in there and see the skeleton, see the organs, see everything, and it became better than X-ray vision later. They gave me more, enhanced abilities to where now it's like a picture. It's better than an X-ray. I mean, it's just looking at, say, the kidney or something, and I can see what it looks like. And that's all from ETs. They gave me those abilities, and I know they do other people as well. So is that a good thing? I think it is. I've been able to help people with that and warn them of possible, illnesses and things they needed to take care of. And in fact, tell people when there wasn't an illness that they were told they had. And it turned out later that that was true. They went to another doctor and they said, no, you don't have this. So yeah, they're out there, they're giving us talents, they're giving us these things to help other human beings on the planet. I mean, what other reason could there be? So there are good guys out there. Now, some of them are bad. The reptilians, most investigators, most people who have had experiences with them will probably say they go in the bad category, although I've had a couple of people say, no, they've been helping them. So, just like human beings, there's good and bad probably in every race. I woke up one night. I was lying in my bed asleep. My husband was downstairs. He was working on something. And I heard a noise of him coming up the steps, and that woke me up. I open my eyes and I see this ET standing over me with his hands over me doing healing. And I had just meditated before I went to sleep asking for some healing. And here is this being leaning over me with his hands. He was his skin was glowing this golden color. I mean, from inside out. And he had this huge cranium, I mean, just going way in the back and kind of underneath. I screamed because it was so bizarre looking, and you come out of his sleep and you see that, and he immediately, well, what he did, this was strange. He was looking down like this. I screamed, and he looked straight up. He didn't look over at me. He looked straight up as if something else or someone else was on the other side of me, and this was a reaction, and then they disappeared. I felt their presence there, though. I knew they were still there. They weren't gone. They were just out of my view. And my husband had just walked up the steps, heard me scream, scared him half to death. He just backed him into the wall. It's like, what? And I said, tell me you saw that. He says, saw what? I'm like, not again. Once again, he doesn't see what I'm seeing. You know, because that's always our story. He doesn't get to see it. But it's just not meant for him, I guess. I think if everybody would try to have an open mind to many possibilities, there are things out there that we don't understand, but that can help us. Like these gifts I've been given with remote viewing and seeing through the human body and being able to look at the past and help find missing persons. Those sorts of things are probably being given to people every day, and they don't realize it because they don't try something new. For instance, I wondered one day if I could communicate with a tree. This was when I was about 7 years ago. And suddenly the tree spoke to me and said something. Well, if I hadn't had an open mind and said, hey, I wonder if I could do this, it never would have happened. So, just try to have an open mind and let these things come into you, and you'd be surprised what can happen and what you'll see and what you might be told, from another being that is outside our realm of understanding, but they may be here to help us and give us some new information. Well, 5 years ago, I had a communication with Thor, and he said I needed to start writing. So I said, okay, I'll start writing. And the first thing I started on was on paranormal, which I know that subject very well. And I wrote Haunted Independence, which is my hometown. And investigations I did there, there's a number of them. There's over 60 investigations. And then I moved on to helping and training people. So that's when I wrote Gateway to the Dead, a Ghost Hunter's Field Guide. And in that, I take a little bit different take with that book than most people do with a guide, like that with that topic. I actually go into the psychic work and the remote viewing work and have some training in there that people can do to enhance their own psychic abilities and open their third eye so that they can use that, in everyday life or ghost hunting if they so wish. And then Thor got a little perturbed with me and said, you're not doing this fast enough. We need to do something different. You need to start a magazine because we've got new information coming in constantly, and the magazine is the fastest way to get that out. So I do, that's when I started UNX News Magazine, and we started late 2011 doing that. It comes out quarterly, and we talk about all the different topics, the paranormal, ghost hunting, UFOs, abductees, implants, time travel, you name it is in there. And, we have writers do submissions. I do a lot of the writing myself. And, it's worked out very well. That's how we get the word out, very quickly. In the meantime, I'm working on some other projects. So I've got a book about my own experiences coming. I've got a book about several other people, like a lady in California who's had these incredible paranormal experiences, these UFO paranormal hotspots in certain regions. I've got some theories I'm working on with ley lines and lines of latitude, a little bit longitude, mostly latitude, and ley lines. And we're finding these hotspots. Kansas City is a major hotspot. And then South Missouri around Piedmont is another big paranormal hotspot. There's another one in Rich Hill. So, and I started finding these hotspots and then drawing some lines and then doing some research, and I find out they're on major ley lines and right along lines of latitude, and they go across the United States. So, there's still much more that we don't understand, but finding this out. So that's why I'm doing the publications, working on a couple of documentary films right now, and all of that will be on my website.